Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. I've got a Christmas card for you today. I'm using the Starry Night background. It has dry embossed and die cut areas, and then the Stampin' Up! Perfect Pines die set. I'm going to start by creating my watercolor panel. I have 4 colors of distress ink. I've got Twisted Citron, Cracked Pistachio, Evergreen Bough, and Pine Needles. I'm going to put a little bit of each one on my craft mat above this paper. This is Canson XL Mixed Media watercolor paper. I just have it cut to 5x7, which is a half a sheet. So I'm going to start by spritzing my cardstock with some water, get a good amount of water on there. And then I'm going to take a glass of water and a paintbrush, and I'm just going to go kind of swiping back and forth up and down here. I'm going to start with the lightest color first, and then I'm going to move to the pistachio and then get darker as I go along. And I'm being careful not to blend too much. I want to be able to see all 4 of these colors when I'm finished. And this is going to give me sort of like a swooshy look to my trees. You know, you have the garland that goes across the Christmas tree, so I'm sort of trying to recreate that with all these different colors of green. So I know I spent probably a little bit too much time going back and forth on this, but it was kind of fun getting all the colors mixed together and making them look really pretty. So the panel is complete. I'm going to hold it up so you can see it. There's a lot of lines in there, but you can still see all the different colors. Now I'm going to let that dry and work on my background. This is the Starry Night die, and I have 2 pieces of vellum, my usual Basil 40 pound, and then I just got this Simon Says stamp vellum, and I was comparing the two, and you can see the level of transparency is pretty much the same. But I'm going to hold up, and the left is Basil. You can see it's kind of bending more than the one in my right hand, which is the Simon Says stamp. So the Simon Says stamp is a little sturdier and stiffer, so I was really impressed with that, and I'm going to use that for this card. I'm going to work on my sandwich. I'm using my base platform, an acrylic plate, and I'll place my die there. And I cut the vellum to A2 size, which is exactly perfectly fitting inside the die, so it's an A2 size exactly. I'll put my other acrylic plate on there and I'll run it through. And this is going to cut all my stars out. It's not going to do the dry embossing though. So then to do the dry embossing, I'm going to take off that acrylic plate, and I'm going to move my platform so that it's on tab 1. And I'm going to keep the die with the vellum facing up on that first acrylic plate. I'll put my rubber silicone pad on there, and then the textures plate, which is a little bit thicker than an acrylic plate. It's just a solid plastic plate. So when I run that through, you can see that now I also have dry embossed areas. And that's why I love this die, because you get the die cuts plus the embossed areas. It just makes it really interesting. The next piece I'm going to work on is the star for the Christmas tree. I'm just taking a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I've got a piece of scratch paper underneath, and I'm just inking it up with some Versamark ink, and I have this enchanted gold embossing powder. It is so beautiful. It's just kind of like, it reminds me of just a princess gold. It's very soft and it's very glittery. So I'm going to cover the whole thing, and you can see how pretty it is. It's sparkly, it's light. It's not gold like foil type gold. It's just a really pretty subtle glimmery gold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the star from the Perfect Pine set, and I'm going to die cut that out of this piece of paper. And now my star is ready to go. Next step is the sentiment. I pulled it from this retro Christmas set by Simon Says Stamp. It just had a really nice font. I stamped it on some Neenah cardstock with Versa Fine Black Onyx ink, and then I just trimmed it out a little bit. I'm not sure how big I'm going to need it. I'm going to determine that later. Now that my watercolor panel is dry, I'm going to take my trees, all 3 sizes, and I'm going to arrange them so that some of them are up, some of them are down, so I get a different color pattern on each one. And I'll run that through the Big Shot. Now for the trunks, I'm going to color them with chocolate chip marker. And as I'm coloring them, you can see how dark they are. They really just don't look very good with the light green of the trees. So what I'm going to do is take an aqua painter, and I'm going to put some water on directly on top of the chocolate chip, and I'll take a tissue and I'll just blot it. And that'll pull up some of the colors so that it blends a little bit more with the tree style. And I'm going to do this on all 3. And I liked the way the brown looked, but I decided to add a little bit more detail, which looking back on it, I probably should have just left it the way it is. But I took a black Stampin' Up! Marker, I used the fine tip side, and I just drew some lines across just to add a little bit of texture, and also kind of blending that side to side swiping I did on the Christmas tree. And so I'm going to do this on all three. And after I did that, I was like, I definitely need to blot this as well, the same way I did with the chocolate chip. So I took my aqua painter and I put some water on top. Same thing, and then I blotted it with the tissue. And it did pull up some of the black, not as much as I would have liked. But anyway, next time I probably just will leave this part out. But I still think it looks nice. It adds a little bit of interest and you get kind of lines in there. I started on the left and some I started on the right of the trunk when I was drawing those lines on there. All right, now my trees are done and I'm gonna work on my card base. I have this washi tape from Stampin' Up and I'm just gonna cut a piece to fit the length of my A2 card. And I'm going to adhere it to the top halfway on, halfway off, because I don't want that huge thick piece. I just want half of it. And then I took a scissor and I trimmed it all out. And I was going to put the same piece on the bottom, the same tape, but then after I cut this piece off very carefully, because you don't want it to rip by itself, you want it to cut with a scissor, I realized that I had enough to do the bottom, and I try to be really frugal with my supplies, but because I cut the sides first, I had to be really careful because it was going to fit perfectly right there on the other edge. But it worked out fine, so I just put that other half on the bottom, and there was a little bit hanging off, so I just took a scissor and I trimmed it out to make it nice and smooth. And so that's going to be my card base. I'm going to start putting the pieces together. I have some multi-medium matte through a fine tip. I'm just going to put a dot at the top of my tree and apply my star. And then once I'm done with that, I can put my sentiment on. I want my sentiment to be sort of coming out of the star, so I figured out where it was going to come out so I could trim it. So I marked it with my scissor at the top of that star point and trimmed it. And now I can turn my tree over and it's going to adhere just to the right side of my star. So I'm going to put just a little bit of glue on the right side of the star. And then I'll turn it over and press it down right on the upper left-hand corner of my sentiment. And that's going to make it look like the sentiment is coming out of the star. Next, I'm going to adhere my trees to the vellum. I'm just going to stack up some pieces of Scotch foam tape up my tree, and then I'll take the release backing off and I'm going to adhere it directly to the vellum piece, which I've cut back to 5.5 by 2 3/4 about. I'm going to use my Misty grid download sheet to make sure that I get this lined up and straight. I'm going to position this largest tree a little bit off the top of my vellum, and then this medium tree, I'm going to make it a little bit lower. So I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to only put Scotch foam tape on the left-hand side because that's where it's going to hit the vellum. And then on the rest of the tree where it's going to lay on top of the tree I already put down, I'm going to use some liquid glue. This is the multi-medium matte. And I'll place that down just to the left of that largest tree. And then same thing for the smallest tree. I'm going to put some Scotch foam just on the right side where it's going to hit the vellum as well as under the sentiment, and some glue on the left side where it's going to hit the back tree. And I'm going to place this one even lower, the same amount of distance below the vellum as my first tree is above the vellum, so it makes it even. And I like to have, when I have 3 things like this, I like to have them at 3 different levels. Like I don't have 2 at one level, 1 at another level. I like to have them at all 3 levels. So anyway, so once I get that position, I'm going to cut off the rest of the sentiment that was hanging off the vellum. And now I can put my vellum onto the card base. And I've got plenty of spaces to put some glue dots to hold it down. I've got those raised star areas from the dry embossing, which kind of discolors, it kind of makes the vellum look white. So I can put the glue dots behind that to adhere it. And plus, of course, I have the areas behind the tree to work with. So I'm going to do maybe like 5 or 6 different pieces or different glue dots here to make sure that I get good coverage, and then I'll flip it over and center it right there in between the washi tape. And that is the card for today. So a little non-traditional black thrown in with some light green. I think it looks good. It really pops, especially with that gold star like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.